I was detained by Customs and Border Patrol. Oh, man. Slop tubers are actually playing with fire.
A left-wing internet superstar played stupid games and won stupid prizes. We're going to break down the latest insane drama involving Twitch streamer and internet socialist Hasan Piker, plus a weird controversy after Trump admits a specific group of refugees that has everybody flip-flopping, and a prominent TikTok feminist openly admits she just hates all men. We're going to get into all this and so much more in today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where we take on the craziest ideas from across the internet, our media, and our politics, all from an independent perspective. Up first, if you're a regular viewer of this show, or just somebody who keeps up with the internet and internet drama, you probably know who Hasan Piker is, but he's this very controversial, very far left Twitch streamer and YouTube star. His fans call him Hasanabi, and he just was glowingly profiled in the New York Times, of course, but he's in controversy yet again because he's claiming that he was detained and grilled about his political views by Customs and Border Patrol when trying to re-enter the United States. He did a long stream about this. We're going to go over a few clips, plus the response from the Trump administration. Here's that first clip where he lays out the beginning of his alleged story.
For those of you who don't know, I was detained by Customs and Border Patrol. Oh, man. Didn't pass the ocular pat down. I believe it was before the ocular pat down. It's the flight manifest that they get ahead of time. They knew who I was, and they were ready to receive me, let's just say. And it wasn't a very warm welcome. So it gets to me. Take a photo. Boom. Walk in. Instantly. The Customs and Border Patrol agent goes, "Step aside, sir." I was like, here we go. All right. She goes, "Step aside, sir. An agent will come and take you to another location." I was like, is that proper protocol? I was like, sometimes it happens. I was like, okay. And I knew at that point, I was like, okay, I'm texting like family. I'm like, this is happening. I'm texting my manager. You know, I was basically I got Lolo on. I was like, listen, I'm going in. All right. I'm freaking going in. Who knows how long this will take? Who knows what will happen? I had already heard like horror stories from people. There was like that one girl on TikTok that had talked about this, and I thought to myself, all right, it's done. It's happening to me as well. It is what it is. M is real high. I'm about to say M is real high multiple times to get these guys off my back.
So pretty clearly from the beginning of this story, and we will get into all of the details, Hasan is claiming that he was intentionally targeted and stopped and brought aside because of the flight manifest, and they saw his name, they knew who he was, and they targeted him because of his very radical left-wing views. The Trump administration disputes this claim. However, let's take a look at a statement from a spokesperson. Tricia McLaughlin wrote that Hasan is lying for likes, claims that his political beliefs triggered the inspection are baseless. Our CBP officers are following the law, not agendas. Upon entering the country, this individual was referred for further inspection, a routine lawful process that occurs daily and can apply for any traveler. Once his inspection was complete, he was promptly released. So it's impossible for me to know the truth of what happened. Was this a random stop? Was he just pulled aside because something was flagged about his travel patterns or some sort of non-political thing? Or was he targeted because of his beliefs and name recognition of some kind? Is he on some kind of a list? The short answer is, I don't know, and I can't really answer that question. We have a he said, she said here. On one side, you have Hasan, whose credibility I certainly question. I mean, he's said lots of misleading and untrue things on his stream in the past, and certainly has a penchant for and a flair for drama. And on the other side, you have the federal government. But listen, I'm always skeptical of the government. They're always going to say a narrative that makes them look good, and they often try to deny a narrative that doesn't make them look good, even if it's true. So I'm not just going to take the Fed's word for it. The short answer is I don't know. So I guess we'll just set that aside. Was he screened? Was he targeted because of his political views and his name ID, or was it random? And instead we'll get into what happened as part of this actual interrogation and Hasan's response to it, because I have serious questions on both fronts. Here's the second clip from Hasan discussing this incident on his live stream.
They take me to this back room, okay? And the back room is not great. The back room is designed in the most hostile way I've ever been inside of a room. The vibes are really back there. Everything is fluorescent light bulb, obviously. It's very obvious that they knew exactly who the I was. It's very obvious that they knew how to like navigate the conversation, and it was a really, really interesting conversation that took place. It was very cordial. I think they were being cordial because they wanted me to say something that was incriminating and say something that was enough to justify further detention from that point on. The dude asked so many insane questions, none of which is illegal, by the way. I just need you to understand. Nothing I've done online is illegal as of now, if that makes sense. Now, laws may change in the future, and they might actually start prosecuting speech, which I do fear is the goal of this administration. But so far, everything I've done is fully protected under the First Amendment, okay? And none of these questions are actually valid questions to ask. I said, I don't like Trump. I was like, what are you going to do? It's protected by the First Amendment. I don't like Trump. Yes, right? Like, I was like, I'm not fond of him. I don't like him.
So, setting aside the melodrama about the hostile vibes and the fluorescent lights, which I rolled my eyes slightly at, Hasan tells, and I watched this full stream, he tells a story about how this Customs and Border Patrol officer took him into this room and then questioned him about his work, his occupation, normal questions, but then specifically asked him questions like, do you like Trump? Do you support Hamas? What are your views on Israel? Sorts of ideological questions. And I guess we really can only go off of Hasan's side of the story here, but I think there's a real problem here if what he's saying is true. Now, let's recap a couple things about Hasan that provide important context to this, though. This is the guy who said America deserved 9/11. This is the guy who openly called in support of violence against a sitting U.S. senator. This is the guy who interviewed someone who I believe, believed to be a Houthi, a member of a designated terror group. He's somebody who has said all sorts of incendiary things, simped in different ways for alleged terrorists like Luigi Mangione. He is somebody who has flirted with the legal line in his speech in too many times to count. He is openly in support of violent extremism in a number of ways, and that's just a fact. That's not even really a disputable thing. But what Hasan says here is true. From what I have seen, nothing he has said on his live stream exceeds the boundaries of First Amendment protections. People have a misconception that you're never allowed to say anything supporting violence or supporting extremism. That's actually not true. You're simply not legally allowed to provide material support for terrorism, which would involve like money or logistics or some sort of material support. You're allowed to say that you just support them. That is considered free speech under the First Amendment, as horrific as it may be. And secondly, he has said different examples of violence that he is generally supportive of. That does not meet the threshold for incitement of violence that is legally prohibited. You are allowed to, in broad terms, endorse violence. You're just not allowed to specifically call on people to engage in imminent acts of direct violence, which to my knowledge, he's never done. So I do have a problem as a First Amendment absolutist with him being questioned about his views on Trump and with him being asked about First Amendment protected speech. But I have mixed feelings on it somewhat because on the other hand, it's like, all right, well, you go on your show to millions of people and openly brag about supporting violence and extremism. I mean, what do you expect? You did kind of set yourself up for this kind of situation. Doesn't make it right, but does make it not exactly surprising. I also have to take serious issue with the way that Hasan talked about this story because it again just reminded me how like radically unhinged his left-wing takes are to the point of absurdity. Like, listen to this where he basically racially profiles a white Customs and Border Patrol officer. Take a listen.
But he was like, listen, I'm Iraqi, so I know. And let me tell you, I do think that him being Iraqi played a big role in this, because if he wasn't, there was a lot of Redditor-ass white boys that are at Customs and Border Patrol at O'Hare Airport. I saw them walk by. There was a dude who looked like he was like 25 max, but he was balding. And I knew immediately if that my agent, I'm screwed. I'm going to CCOT. This dude is going to literally cook me. So I got a little lucky. All right. I will admit.
Hey, so that's racial profiling. I have nothing against an Iraqi American person working in Customs and Border Patrol, of course. I mean, anybody who's an American who is of any race or background who can do the job should be able to do it. But for him to say he's happy he got the Iraqi American Customs and Border Patrol official and not some random white guy who he suspects on their looks alone would have been racist and sent him to a foreign prison, yeah, that's just anti-white racism. That's just discrimination, stereotyping, bigotry. For all you know, that white dude is a bleeding heart liberal. For all you know, maybe he is a MAGA Republican or whatever, but he's a professional who would have done his job in a great way. It's actually not good, not morally acceptable, and certainly not woke or progressive to racially profile and stereotype people. But ultra left-wing progressives like Hasan Piker seem to think it's okay when it's done in that direction. I'm against it all the time, in any direction. But that's just me and my radical hot takes. There was also a strange part of this stream where Hasan attempted to blame people who have criticized him on the internet for the fact that he was detained by the federal government. Let's listen to that.
A lot of the that like the Ethan Kleins of the world have like cried about over and over again were unironically brought up in that conversation. And I was shocked. Okay. Not like the bleach sword, obviously, but like the Houthi. Like, did you interview a Houthi? It says here that you interviewed a Houthi. And I was like, or was he actually a Houthi? And I was like, he's not. You can look to all of the reporting that came out afterwards and before I interviewed him. And I genuinely, in that moment, was thinking like, these dumbass slop tubers are actually playing with fire. And I even thought about not even mentioning this because I was like, I don't want to give him any sort of like power over the situation. But like the reality of the matter is 100% the Trump administration is inadvertently working with a lot of these dip are playing a formative role in getting people in trouble with the law.
Yes, guys, he's serious. He just attempted to blame slop tubers, his liberal-leaning YouTube critics who criticize him for openly broadcasting pro-terror propaganda on his live stream, which he has done. Again, I don't think he's crossed the legal line on any of his stuff, but he's been so extreme in so many ways, and people have criticized him for it, including interviewing somebody who he believed to be, is my recollection of the situation, he believed to be a member of the Houthis. Now, it turned out that that kid was like a poser and wasn't actually after the fact, but he still did do a friendly interview with somebody who I think at the bare minimum was pro-Houthi, pro in support of the violent actions of a designated terror group. That's not great, and people have every right to criticize you for it. They have every right to criticize you for what you said about why Rick Scott, a sitting U.S. senator, is deserving of violence. And it is not our fault if we criticize you for these things and then they are brought up when you are interviewed by Customs and Border Patrol. So what? We can't criticize someone and make fair criticisms because they might be used by the government in an inappropriate way? That's not logical. That's not reasonable. And I'm also not even sure that it's true. The source for these things that he's saying, like, oh, you interviewed a Houthi or whatever, these officers are probably getting it from the countless news articles that were written about it at the time in mainstream media publications. Like, these things did burst out of the online drama bubble. It wasn't just online or on Ethan Klein's podcast where this got discussed. All of these controversies get written up in tons of media outlets. If you ask me, it's much more likely that it came from there than from, various liberal YouTube beefs. But regardless, it's not their fault. It's nobody else's fault what other people do with valid criticisms they raise to the surface. And you're just trying to shield yourself from criticism in a very manipulative and exploitative way here. Now, Hasan also brought up another point that touches on press freedom and journalism, which is an issue near and dear to my heart that I want to talk about. Here's that clip.
They also asked, have you ever interviewed a member of Hamas? Have you ever had a communication or correspondence with a member of Hamas, Hezbollah, or the Houthis? Now, what's really insane about that is that as someone who works in media, sometimes I do actually do journalism, right? As I've maintained this position over and over again. And I said that I would, if given the opportunity, talk to someone that is a part of the Ansar Allah movement, a Houthi, or even Hamas, or even Hezbollah, right? I think that I have the right to do so. So that is the part where they were like, if you answer yes to any of that, that's when, you know, there's like actually illegal stuff in there. Having said that, there is one part of it that wasn't illegal, which is being in communications or being in contact with someone in Hamas. Like, that is a part of journalism you actually can do. It's ridiculous. Like, you can interview ISIS. Like, what are we talking about? The notion that this would be an issue for the Customs and Border Patrol is ridiculous.
So here he is right. I mean, it is illegal to provide material support to any of these kinds of organizations, which he denies doing, and we don't have evidence that he has done, but it's not illegal to speak to them, especially if you work in some kind of media or journalistic capacity. That is a part of journalism. That is protected by the First Amendment. You are allowed to interview these people. So even if he had done that, and he says he hasn't, and I have no evidence otherwise, that wouldn't actually be a crime or something that he could be denied entry into the United States over. And that's the real concern here. I don't necessarily have an issue with them asking him about things that are potential crimes, like, have you provided material support to one of these organizations? And I do think he's opened the door to those questions with his public commentary. But to the extent that they were grilling him on First Amendment protected views and activity, no matter how odious or extreme I find them to be, I think that's inappropriate. And he is a United States citizen. He is born in America. He's not here on some visitor's visa where it gets a little more debatable. Americans should not be ideologically screened or grilled about their political beliefs before being allowed to enter their home country. That is a right, not a privilege, when you are an American, to come into the country. And look, I don't know whether this was directed top down from the Trump administration. Even if it wasn't, though, even if they just pulled him aside randomly and then looked him up and asked him these questions, I do think it's inappropriate. And it's not something I want the government to be engaged in. They should be screening for actual crimes. They should be trying to stop serious things that come through the border illegally and looking for signs of potential issues with smuggling of different sorts, including of humans. They should not be grilling streamers about how they feel about Trump or foreign wars. That's my take on all this, but you guys can let me know what you think in the comments. Do you disagree for some reason? I'm always open to hearing you out, and I do take the time to read the comments. Do make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Do hit that like button before you go. Remember to check out the new merch line that we just dropped with the On My Last Brain Cell designs, and to leave me voice notes for my Friday episode where I react to your woke horror stories and give you advice about your personal situations. The link to both of those things will be in the description, plus the link to my new second YouTube channel where I will be posting original bonus content like story times and Ask Me Anythings. Go check that out and make sure you're subscribed as well. Now we got to talk about a story that I find really interesting because it kind of has everybody engaged in like political jujitsu all of a sudden. Liberals are now mad about immigration and MAGA suddenly loves refugees. Yeah, that's the odd paradox that we find ourselves in after the Trump administration just welcomed in about 50 white refugees from South Africa, where they say white people are being systematically discriminated against. Take a listen to this coverage from The Hill.
One group of refugees are receiving a warm welcome from the Trump administration. A stark contrast, as most refugees have been halted from entering the US. The exception, white South Africans. They are set to land in the US today. And these Afrikaners, white descendants of primarily Dutch colonizers, have been singled out favourably by this administration.
President Trump is claiming they are victims of racial discrimination. He says they're being persecuted by their black-led government because of their race.
As a reminder, South Africa was controlled under apartheid rule for decades by its white minority. Under that system, black South Africans were denied basic rights. That system came to an end in 1994. And the current South African government is hitting back hard against Trump's allegations, saying it's completely false. They say Afrikaners are some of the richest and most successful people in the country.
White House Chief of Staff Stephen Miller commented on the situation. Let's take a look.
What's happening in South Africa fits the textbook definition of why the refugee program was created. This is persecution based on a protected characteristic, in this case, race.
Now, the context you need to know about this is that one of Trump's first orders of business after starting his second term was to sign an executive order shutting down almost all refugee admissions to the United States. This was controversial because it left a lot of people who we were going to let into the country screwed, including some people who helped us and helped our military in Afghanistan who are now at risk. Spectrum News reports Trump's immigration orders have left Afghans who helped the U.S. fight the Taliban in limbo. They helped the U.S. military order airstrikes against Taliban and Islamic State fighters and worked as drivers and translators during America's longest war. They were set to start new lives in the United States. Then, President Donald Trump issued executive orders that put an end to programs used to help Afghans get to the safety in America. Now, those same Afghans who underwent a years-long background check find themselves in a state of limbo. All told, there's about 15,000 of these Afghans who weren't allowed to come here. And Trump, in his executive order, argued that we could not afford to use taxpayer resources to support refugees, that they posed a security risk, and that we needed a near complete and near total shutdown on this program. But now they're making an exception, and here's why, according to Donald Trump.
I want to ask you about South African refugees. Dozens of Afrikaners who claim discrimination in their home country are heading to the United States, where your administration is going to welcome them as refugees. Now, this comes as you've halted virtually all refugee admissions for people fleeing famine and war from countries like Sudan and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Why are you creating an expedited path into the country for Afrikaners but not others?
Because they're being killed, and we don't want to see people be killed. It's a genocide that's taking place that you people don't want to write about, but it's a terrible thing that's taking place, and farmers are being killed. They happen to be white, but whether they're white or black makes no difference to me, but white farmers are being brutally killed, and their land is being confiscated in South Africa. I don't care about their race, their color. I don't care about their height, their weight. I don't care about anything. I just know that what's happening is terrible. I have people that live in South Africa. They say it's a terrible situation taking place. So we've essentially extended citizenship to those people to escape from that violence and come here.
So I'm no expert in South African politics or what's going on there. So let's just accept this at face value. These white farmers, let's say they are being killed. They are being targeted in a genocide. That would be horrible, like it would be in any context. But it's not unique to South Africa. That's also the case in many other parts of the world, including like the Afghanis who we turned away, who may be killed by the Taliban now, but he, in those cases, thought it wasn't worth it to allow the refugees in, and now is making an exception. This is the part that doesn't make sense to me. I have no issue with these South Africans coming here. I welcome them, and I'm horrified by what I'm hearing happen to them in South Africa. But I also think there are a lot of other people who should be let in, and the bizarre double standards here don't make sense to me. This move is leading to a lot of pushback, of course, from Democrats and liberal media, including some that borders on hysterical. Here's one segment from CNN.
So what's the difference between the refugees that they're talking about here and those refugees? I could guess. I mean, I think everyone...
They're white.
They're white. Thank you. They are white. And I think, look, if that is how you feel, fine, then hold the line. But there are people all over the world, even people in this country right now, who are seeking, who have sought asylum, who are going through the process of asylum seeking, and have been detained by ICE and are being deported. There's also a genocide happening in the Congo right now that I don't see any Congolese being getting relief to come to this country. So there are Afghanis that helped us in Afghanistan that we have left behind. Even the last administration didn't do right by them. This administration can do right by them, but they are not, because it doesn't fit the narrative of the type of immigrants that we want in our country.
So I'm not going to jump and say that it's just because they're white that they're being let in and others aren't. I think it may also have to do with Elon Musk's particular connection to South Africa, and so maybe an exception was made there, but you can't ignore the racial element to this, and it certainly doesn't look good. Now, it's worth noting that this is a relatively small number of refugees compared to thousands of refugees that were set to be accepted from places like Afghanistan, but still, it's hard to imagine MAGA supporters being okay with these conditions in really any other scenario. The journalist Zed Jilani posted screenshots of a government website set to help white South Africans come to the United States, where it boasts about how much taxpayer-funded government assistance they can get and all the welfare programs they can participate in, and how they don't actually have to prove that they were being persecuted at all. Now, I have always supported refugee resettlement in the United States to a certain amount. Obviously, we can't have millions of people coming here, but I think we can open our doors to thousands of people, and after extreme vetting to make sure we're only letting in people who are safe and not danger to the country, we can let them in. And I've always supported that. And I really have no issue with South Africans if they're facing racial persecution, white South Africans, whatever. Yeah, I have no issue with that. I'm supportive of that. But there is something bizarre and inconsistent to me about the Trump administration being so anti-refugee and so against, American tax dollars being used to support foreigners and all this stuff, and then suddenly making an exception for this one group. But there's also something incredibly bizarre about the way that many liberal commentators and institutions are suddenly against refugees. The Episcopal Church, for example, is now refusing to resettle white Afrikaners, citing moral opposition. NPR reports that in a striking move that ends a nearly 4 decades-old relationship between the federal government and the Episcopal Church, the denomination announced on Monday that it is terminating its partnership with the government to resettle refugees, citing moral opposition to resettling white Afrikaners from South Africa who have been classified as refugees by President Trump's administration. In light of our church's steadfast commitment to racial justice and reconciliation and our historic ties with the Anglican Church of Southern Africa, we are not able to take this step, they wrote. Accordingly, we have determined that by the end of the federal fiscal year, we will conclude our refugee resettlement grant agreements with the United States federal government. This is bizarre. So they're cutting off their working relationship with the government, where they receive taxpayer dollars to help resettle refugees, because they don't want to help 50 white South Africans who are being brought here because they're facing racial persecution. And they're citing racial justice as the reason that they don't want to do that. What? Even if you somehow thought these weren't real refugees, these weren't legitimate or whatever, I mean, just work with them and help find 50 people new homes in America. And then you can continue your relationship with the federal government for all the future refugee resettlements you do. It's so bizarre that they would choose this hill to die on. And it really does seem like they must just have Trump derangement syndrome or be really ensconced in some far left ideology. The whole saga with these South African refugees is just a reminder to me of how much partisanship and tribalism can really rot your brain and can make you and take you to just totally inconsistent places. My hot take of the day is that you should not determine your support for different immigration policies based on random political, ideological, or racial affiliations. And if you do, you're not thinking logically, you're thinking emotionally and tribally. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Finally, we gotta talk about one more crazy story because this TikTok feminist just admitted she openly hates men. We're talking, of course, about Drew Afualo, the very prominent, supposedly feminist, pro-woman TikTok content creator and podcast host who has a very prominent show on Spotify, who is doing the interviews circuit again and is saying some really nasty things about hating all men quite openly. Let's take a look at this first clip.
I told people before, they're like, oh, you hate all men. I'm like, I've never said that, but if the shoe fits, wear it. I don't give a f. But also, yeah, don't you? Haven't you ever spent time with one? They're awful. Like, have you ever seen a group of guys out, like all straight dudes, and they're all laughing? Have you ever been like, God, I wonder what they're laughing at? No. When they're laughing, I'm going, the f are they doing? Something bad, probably.
I'm like, they probably just hit a woman.
They're probably high-fiving over a slur.
True.
I bet. That's what I think.
High-fiving over a slur.
When I see girls and gays and theys all out and they're king and they're laughing and I'm like, oh, that looks awesome.
Mm-hmm.
When I see men doing it, I'm like,
it's like, what are you
laughing
doing?
at? What's so funny?
What did you do?
The state of the world? Turn on the news. I bet you wouldn't be laughing so hard. I'm just harassing them.
Well, she seems lovely. I love how she's like, I've never said I hate all men, but yeah, I do. And don't you? No, because we're not close-minded, sexist bigots, and we don't collectively condemn entire demographic groups of people because of the actions of some individuals. That's what racists do. That's what sexists do. That's not what open-minded and tolerant people are supposed to do. But she really does just openly say that all men are bad because she thinks so from the one she's interacted with. But also, it's bizarrely incoherent because she has a boyfriend, maybe fiance, maybe husband, I don't know, who she raves about as an amazing man. And it's like, but you just said they're all bad and you hate them all. So which is it? You'd think that if you actually believed that, you would like swear off men and not be in a relationship with one. I also question the self-respect of a guy who would date a girl who openly goes out there and says she hates all men. What? And this wasn't a one-off. This wasn't just one time she was goofing around. She talks like this all the time. Take a listen to another recent clip.
How do you live at this intersection of, I hate men, I see all this terrible behavior online, but I'm with a man, I'm marrying a man. And by the way, Ashley and I make fun of men too, but we have like great fathers and brothers.
Yeah,
friends.
Most do. Most women who do hate men have great fathers, brothers, and men.
Yeah, so we do think there's like great men. Obviously you found one, so did Ashley. Yeah. But like, how do you live at that sort of like intersection of the two?
I mean, I think it's a lot simpler than people think. I think people overcomplicate it. It's just, I'm not talking about you. Amen. But it doesn't change the inherent fact that men are evil. That is true. Like man as a whole is evil. Like just as an entity, a general idea, men have inflicted violence and oppression on the world in ways that are irreparable. Like it's okay if we say that out loud. It's okay if we say that men are inherently evil. It's like, it's not all men, but for some reason, always a man. Every time something terrible happens, always a man, like 99% of the time. So I feel like it's a lot simpler than people may think. I don't hate my man, I hate most men. And for me, I think given what men have done to me personally, to people I love, and the world as a whole, if they all start guilty and have to work their way to innocent, it's not really a big deal to me. I feel very like convicted in that. If you're not awful, prove it. Yeah. Quit talking about it and do it.
She actually just said men should start being considered guilty and have to prove their way innocent. That's dystopian and evil. And she wants to say two things at once. She wants to say, yes, I hate all men. But then, like, if you're a man and you're upset by that, well, or if you were a good man, you'd know I'm not talking about you. Well, what do you think the all means? And then she retreats to most. It's like a Mott and Bailey thing. It's like she wants to say the edgy, extreme thing for clicks and attention, but then retreat to a more defensible position. But even then, most men are not bad, okay? It is, obviously, I do acknowledge the fact that men commit more violence and more crime than women. That is absolutely a fact. But that's not most men, certainly not. And it's wrong to judge an individual for something other people that are in some demographic group based on some immutable trait do. That would be like me saying, oh, I'm scared of black men because they commit murders at a higher rate than other races of men. That would be wrong for me to apply that to any individual black man because it's not his fault what other people who look like him have done. And of course, woke people like Drew would totally see the problem with that kind of logic when it's applied in that direction. But when they can just blame all men for the fact that male leaders have engaged in violence and repression, that's fine and cute and dandy. And they have millions of adoring fans on the internet. I really do believe that these female influencers, the all men are trash kind of influencers, are like the women version of the red pill grifters who give terrible advice and talk about how all women are bad and evil and trash. And the whole thing is so incredibly toxic. And the fact that these kinds of folks have millions of adoring fans online and are constantly going viral and are uplifted and promoted with these toxic messages. And then we wonder why modern dating is broken, why gender relations are fraying and struggling. I mean, it's not a surprise to me with people like this openly spewing hate and divisive nonsense on the internet every day and just being rewarded with it with huge audiences and huge sums of money. This is bleak, but sadly kind of typical for TikTok, especially TikTok these days. What do you all make of this? Let me know in the comments. All right, guys, that'll be it for this episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Please do make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Do hit that like button before you go. Comment with your thoughts, yada, yada, yada. Check out the new merch designs. My boyfriend worked really hard on them. Be sure to send some voice notes for Friday's episode and subscribe to my second channel while you're at it. And with that, we'll talk again real soon.